The Glimmering Woods Terror, a scary camping story. Subscribe to Another World for great videos to relax, study, or just enjoy. The house stood at the edge of the forest like a forgotten relic, isolated in the vast, sprawling wilderness of Tennessee. It was late autumn when we first moved in, and the leaves were thick on the ground, carpeting the forest in shades of red, brown, and gold. My wife Claire was captivated by the place. She had always wanted to live somewhere quiet, somewhere our son, Ethan, could grow up surrounded by nature. So, when the opportunity came to buy a remote property, we jumped on it without much thought. The first few days were peaceful. The hum of the wind through the trees and the soft rustle of the underbrush became a comforting background noise. The silence out here was different, almost alive in a way that felt comforting. But that peace didn't last long. The strangeness started subtly, almost like a whisper at the back of our minds. It began with the dog, Max, a loyal mutt we had rescued years ago. Normally, he loved being outdoors, running through the woods with Ethan or lying in the sun. But now, he refused to go outside once the sun dipped below the horizon. He'd stand by the door, ears flat, tail between his legs, growling softly at the trees. No matter how much I coaxed him, he wouldn't step foot beyond the porch after dark. At first, I thought maybe he had caught wind of a wild animal or something that spooked him, but it didn't stop. Day after day, his reluctance grew worse, and soon he wouldn't go near the woods even during the day. Then came the noises. It was always at night. I would be sitting in the living room, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, while Claire put Ethan to bed upstairs. The nights in the woods were usually full of sound, crickets, owls, and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. But there were moments when the forest would fall completely silent. No wind, no animals, nothing. Just an eerie, heavy quiet that felt wrong. In those moments, I'd hear it. A loud resonant thud, like a large rock being thrown against the ground or a tree nearby. I'd rush outside with a flashlight, expecting to find something, anything. But there was never any sign of what caused the sound. One night, while I was out investigating one of these strange thuds, Claire came running out of the house, panic in her eyes. "Did you hear that?" she asked, breathless. "Hear what?" "Ethan, he's crying. He's in the woods." I froze. "Ethan's in bed, Claire. I just checked on him before coming out here." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I heard him. I heard him calling for help." I looked back at the house, then at the woods, my stomach twisting. "He's inside, Claire. You were dreaming." But she insisted, and I couldn't shake the look in her eyes. Pure terror, as though something deep within her knew it wasn't just a nightmare. She refused to go back inside until I walked the perimeter of the property, shining the light into the dark, tangled trees. I found nothing, of course. But from that night on, Claire was never the same. She became distant, distracted, always glancing toward the woods as if expecting something to emerge. Then Ethan started acting strange. At first, it was small things. He'd sit by the window, staring out at the trees for hours. When I asked him what he was looking at, he'd point and say, "The man in the woods." My heart would race each time, but when I looked, there was no one there. He started talking to someone that Claire and I couldn't see, always insisting he was talking to him. We thought it was an imaginary friend, just a phase. But the way Ethan described this friend, it didn't feel like the harmless fantasies of a child. "He watches us from the trees," Ethan said one night at dinner. Claire dropped her fork, the clatter echoing in the too-silent room. "He likes when it's quiet." Claire and I exchanged a glance, unease crawling up my spine. "Who is he, Ethan?" Claire asked gently. "The man," Ethan said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. He's shiny. He glimmers. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Glimmers. The next night, things escalated. It was late, past midnight, and I was in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Max had started growling again, his body pressed against the door, hackles raised. He wouldn't leave my side, and his eyes kept darting toward the window. I heard it then, just outside, faint at first but growing louder, panting, like the heavy breathing of something large, something out of sight, pacing just beyond the edge of the porch. I sat up, my pulse hammering in my ears, straining to hear more. The panting continued, louder now, closer. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and walked slowly to the window, heart in my throat. My breath fogged the glass as I peered outside. Nothing. But the panting was there, right outside, even though I couldn't see a thing. Suddenly, Max went silent, his ears perking up. His growl dropped to a low whine and he backed up, slinking toward the bed with his tail between his legs. I froze, gripping the flashlight tightly, the panting still loud in my ears, and then it stopped. The woods went dead silent again, and for a long moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The next day, Claire told me she was hearing things too. Voices, soft, distant cries for help, always coming from the woods. But when I went out to check, I couldn't find anyone, no trace of another person anywhere. We were alone. Except, we weren't. It was a few days later when my niece Emma came to visit. She had always loved the outdoors, and we thought her presence might ease the tension that had been growing in the house. She and I decided to take a walk through the woods that afternoon, just to clear our heads. Ethan stayed behind with Claire. The walk was quiet at first, too quiet. The forest felt oppressive, like the trees were closing in around us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Emma noticed it too. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her brow furrowed. "I don't like it out here," she said softly. "It feels wrong." I nodded. "I know what you mean." We walked a little further when, suddenly, Emma stopped dead in her tracks. I followed her gaze, my heart leaping into my throat. There, just beyond the trees, stood a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, and shimmering like heat waves rising off the pavement on a summer day. Its body was translucent, flickering in and out of sight, and its movements were wrong, unnatural, jerky, like it was glitching. My blood ran cold. The thing stared at us, though I couldn't make out its face, just the vague outline of a humanoid figure. And then, in an instant, it was gone. Emma grabbed my arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to get back." We rushed back to the house, not daring to look back, but I could feel it. Something was following us, watching us. The air around me felt charged, heavy with dread. When we got back to the house, Claire was waiting at the door, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. "I heard him again," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Ethan, he was calling for me, but he was inside the whole time." That night, the noises in the woods grew louder, the thuds, the strange panting, the eerie silence, and then came the voices. Claire and I both heard them now, faint cries for help, always just out of reach, echoing through the trees. We stopped sleeping. We couldn't. Every time we closed our eyes, we felt it, something lurking just beyond the edge of the darkness. And then, one night, I saw it again. The Glimmer Man. It was standing at the edge of the woods, just beyond the porch, its translucent form flickering in and out of existence. It moved toward me, its jerky, unnatural gait sending waves of terror through my body. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My feet were frozen to the ground. It was like the thing had some kind of hold on me, pulling me closer with every second. Then, in an instant, it was gone. Just gone. I ran inside, slamming the door behind me, gasping for breath. Claire was sitting in the living room, holding Ethan close, her face pale with fear. "We need to leave," she whispered, her voice trembling. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't bound by the woods. It would follow us, no matter where we went. The Glimmer Man had us, and there was no escape. The next morning, I woke to find Claire staring out the window, her eyes distant, as if she had lost herself in the woods even though she was standing right here.